Subscribe now and press the bell icon so you never miss an emotional story that touches your heart. Marcus Williams stood in the long security line at Riverside Mall, his patience wearing thin with every passing second. The morning sun blazed through the glass ceiling, making the crowded entrance feel like an oven. His 3-year-old daughter Emma sat quietly in her stroller, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. She had been so good all morning, not complaining once about the heat or the wait. Marcus glanced at his watch for the 10th time. They were already running late for Emma's doctor appointment across town. The mall had recently installed new security measures after a series of thefts. Now everyone had to pass through metal detectors and have their bags checked. Marcus understood the need for safety, but today of all days, the system seemed to be moving at a snail's pace. Only one security guard was manning the checkpoint, and he appeared to be inspecting every single item with unnecessary thoroughness. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead and tried to stay calm. Emma looked up at him with her big brown eyes and smiled. That smile usually melted his heart, but today it only reminded him of why they needed to hurry. The appointment was crucial. Emma had been experiencing severe headaches for weeks, and after multiple visits, the specialist had finally agreed to see her. Missing this appointment meant waiting another 2 months. The line barely moved. Marcus counted the people ahead of him. 12. At this rate, they would never make it on time. He pulled out his phone and called the doctor's office, explaining the situation. The receptionist was sympathetic, but firm. If they were more than 15 minutes late, they would have to reschedule. Marcus felt his chest tighten. He looked down at Emma again, who was now playing with her rabbit, making it hop on her lap when they finally reached the front of the line. Marcus quickly collapsed the stroller and placed it on the conveyor belt for scanning. He lifted Emma into his arms and walked through the metal detector. No beep. He started to move forward to collect their things. But the security guard held up his hand. The guard was a middle-aged man named Robert, with tired eyes and a stern expression. He picked up the stroller and began examining it closely, turning it over and checking every pocket and crevice. Marcus tried to stay patient. He really did. But when Robert started unscrewing parts of the stroller frame, something inside Marcus snapped. "Sir, I really need to get through." "My daughter has a doctor's appointment," Marcus said, his voice strained but still polite. Robert didn't even look up. He continued his inspection, now pulling out tools to examine the wheel mechanisms. Marcus felt his heart pounding. He checked his watch again. They had exactly 12 minutes to get to the car, drive across town through morning traffic, and make it to the office. "Please, this is really important. Can't you see? There's nothing wrong with the stroller?" Marcus pleaded. His voice was getting louder now, drawing attention from other shoppers. Robert finally looked up, his face expressionless. He spoke in a monotone voice, reciting what sounded like a rehearsed speech about security protocols and the importance of thorough checks. Marcus felt the anger rising in his chest like a volcano about to erupt. This wasn't about security anymore. This was about power. Robert was enjoying making people wait, enjoying having control over their time and their lives. Emma started to whimper in his arms, sensing her father's distress. The sound of his daughter's worry was the final straw. Without thinking, without considering the consequences, Marcus grabbed the stroller from Robert's hands. The guard tried to hold on to it, and for a moment they were locked in a silent tug of war. Then Marcus yanked it free with such force that Robert stumbled backward. But Marcus wasn't done. All the frustration, all the fear about his daughter's health, all the stress of the past few weeks came pouring out in one explosive moment. He lifted the stroller high above his head, threw it with all his strength. The stroller sailed through the air, spinning like a wheel, and crashed into the security desk behind Robert. The sound of metal hitting metal echoed through the mall entrance like a gunshot. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. The stroller bounced off the desk, sending papers and equipment flying in all directions. A computer monitor teetered on the edge before crashing to the floor. The entire crowd gasped in unison. Everyone froze. Shoppers stopped in their tracks. Other security guards came running. Mall employees poked their heads out from nearby stores. Time seemed to stand still as everyone processed what had just happened. Marcus stood there, Emma still in his arms, breathing heavily. his face red with anger and immediately flooding with regret. The silence was deafening. Marcus looked around at the shocked faces staring at him. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men shook their heads in disapproval. Someone had their phone out, already recording. Marcus realized with horror what he had done. He had lost control. In front of his daughter, in front of dozens of witnesses, he had let his anger turn him into someone he didn't recognize. Emma started crying, burying her face in her father's shoulder. The sound of her sobs broke through the silence like a knife. Marcus wanted to disappear. He wanted to take back the last 30 seconds of his life. But he couldn't. Damage was done. Robert stood there, his face a mixture of shock and anger. Reaching for the radio on his belt, 3 more security guards arrived, surrounding Marcus. Their hands were on their belts, ready to respond if he became violent again. Marcus held Emma tighter, his own eyes now filling with tears. What had he done? This wasn't him. He was a good father, a good person. He had never lost his temper like this before. But the stress, the worry, the fear for his daughter's health had built up like pressure in a dam, and it had finally broken through in the worst possible way. One of the security guards, a younger man with kind eyes, stepped forward. His voice was calm but firm as he asked Marcus to put Emma down and come with them. Marcus shook his head, holding his daughter closer. He wasn't going to let her go. She needed him, and despite what had just happened, he needed her too. The standoff continued as the crowd watched, waiting to see what would happen next. The security guards formed a tighter circle around Marcus and Emma. The head of security, a tall woman named Officer Chen, pushed through the crowd. She had been working at Riverside Mall for 15 years and had seen her share of incidents. But something about this situation felt different. The man holding the crying child didn't look like a troublemaker. He looked terrified and broken. Officer Chen held up her hand, signaling the other guards to step back. She approached Marcus slowly, her voice gentle. She asked him to take a deep breath and explain what was happening. Marcus tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. Emma's crying had turned into hiccups. She clung to her father like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. Marcus finally found his voice. The words tumbled out in a rush. He explained about the doctor's appointment, about Emma's headaches, about the months of worry and sleepless nights. He talked about how the specialist kept running tests but couldn't find answers. He described the fear that gripped him every time Emma complained about pain. His voice cracked as he admitted that he was scared, so scared that something serious was wrong with his little girl. Officer Chen listened without interrupting. She noticed details that others had missed. Emma's pale complexion, the dark circles under Marcus's eyes that spoke of countless worried nights, the medical appointment card that had fallen from his pocket during the confrontation. She had children of her own, and she recognized the desperation of a parent trying to protect their child. The crowd had grown larger now. Some people were still recording on their phones, eager to capture drama for social media. But others were beginning to whisper among themselves. A few parents in the crowd exchanged knowing glances. They understood that breaking point, that moment when fear and love and helplessness collide into something explosive. They had been there too, maybe not throwing strollers, but losing their composure in other ways. Robert, the security guard, was demanding that Marcus be arrested immediately. He pointed at the damaged equipment and insisted that this was assault. His face was red, and his hands shook with anger and embarrassment. He had never been challenged like this before, and in front of so many people. His pride was wounded, and he wanted justice. But Officer Chen held up her hand again, this time to silence Robert. She made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of calling the police right away, she asked Marcus if he would be willing to sit down and talk. She gestured toward a small office near the security checkpoint. Marcus nodded, grateful for any alternative to immediate arrest. He followed Officer Chen, still carrying Emma. While 2 other guards stayed close behind, in the office, the atmosphere changed. Away from the crowd and the cameras, the tension began to ease slightly. Officer Chen offered Emma a piece of candy from a jar on her desk. The little girl peeked out from her father's shoulder, her curiosity overcoming her fear. She reached for the candy with a small hand, And Officer Chen smiled warmly at her. Marcus sat down heavily in a chair, leaking the weight of what he had done, pressing down on him. He apologized over and over, his voice hollow. He knew there was no excuse for his behavior. Violence was never the answer, no matter how stressed or scared he felt. He had endangered people, damaged property, and worst of all, he had frightened his own daughter. Officer Chen let him speak, let him pour out his guilt and fear. Then she asked him a simple question. When was the last time he had asked for help? Marcus looked up, confused. She explained that she could see he was drowning, trying to handle everything alone. The medical appointments, the worry, probably financial stress too. She asked if there was anyone he could call, anyone who could help him get Emma to the doctor today. Marcus thought about his sister Lauren. They had drifted apart over the years, life taking them in different directions. But she lived only 20 minutes away. Before he could overthink it, Officer Chen handed him her phone. Marcus dialed the number he still knew by heart, hoping she would answer a call from an unknown number. Lauren picked up on the third ring. When she heard her brother's voice, strained and desperate, she didn't ask questions. She just said she was on her way. Marcus felt something break inside him, but this time, it was the wall he had built around his pride. Tears streamed down his face as he thanked her. Emma watched her father cry and reached up to wipe his tears with her tiny hands, while they waited for Lauren. Officer Chen made another unexpected move. She called the doctor's office herself, explaining the situation. She spoke with authority and compassion, advocating for Emma and Marcus. The receptionist, touched by the story and Officer Chen's sincerity, agreed to hold the appointment if they could get there within the hour. Robert appeared in the doorway, still angry. He wanted to know what was happening, why the man who had assaulted him wasn't in handcuffs. Officer Chen stepped outside to speak with him privately. Through the glass, Marcus could see them having an intense conversation. Robert gestured wildly, his voice rising. Officer Chen remained calm, speaking in low, measured tones. After several minutes, something shifted. Robert's shoulders dropped. His expression changed from anger to something else. Maybe understanding, or at least acceptance. Officer Chen had a gift for reading people, and she had made Robert see what she saw. A desperate father, not a dangerous criminal. A man who needed help, not punishment. Lauren burst through the mall entrance 20 minutes later, her hair messy and her shirt inside out. She had clearly thrown on whatever clothes were nearby and rushed over. When she saw Marcus holding Emma in the security office, surrounded by guards, her face went pale, but she didn't hesitate. She marched right up to Officer Chen and demanded to know what was happening to her brother. Marcus stood up, and the siblings looked at each other for the first time in 2 years. All the petty arguments and hurt feelings that had kept them apart suddenly seemed meaningless. Lauren's eyes filled with tears as she saw how exhausted and scared her brother looked. She opened her arms, and Marcus stepped into them. Emma sandwiched between them. Officer Chen explained the situation to Lauren. She detailed the plan she had worked out. Marcus would pay for the damages to the security equipment. He would write a formal apology to Robert and the mall management. He would also attend anger management counseling. In return, she would advocate for no criminal charges to be filed. It wasn't standard procedure, but Officer Chen believed in second chances, especially when children were involved. Lauren immediately agreed to help with whatever was needed. She said she would drive Marcus and Emma to the doctor right away. She would also help with Emma's care going forward. No more struggling alone. Marcus felt overwhelming gratitude wash over him. He had been so focused on being strong, on handling everything himself, that he had forgotten the strength in accepting help. Robert stood in the corner of the security office, arms crossed, watching the reunion between Marcus and Lauren. Officer Chen had convinced him to give Marcus a chance, but he wasn't entirely comfortable with the decision. He had rules to follow, procedures to maintain. Yet something about seeing the family together, seeing the obvious love and desperation, made him reconsider his rigid stance. Officer Chen approached Robert once more. She spoke quietly, asking him about his own life. Robert hesitated, then admitted he had 2 grown children he barely spoke to anymore. Work had always come first. Rules and regulations had been easier to navigate than messy human emotions. Looking at Marcus holding Emma, Robert saw something he had lost along the way. The willingness to break, to show vulnerability, to put family above everything else. After a long moment, Robert nodded slowly. He would agree to Officer Chen's plan. But he had one condition. He wanted to speak with Marcus directly, man to man. Officer Chen agreed and called Marcus over. Lauren took Emma, bouncing her gently and pointing out the security monitors to distract her. The two men stood facing each other. The air between them was thick with tension. Robert spoke first. His voice was gruff, but there was something softer underneath. He said he understood stress. He understood fear. But he also said that violence was never acceptable, regardless of the circumstances. Marcus nodded, agreeing completely. He apologized sincerely, looking Robert directly in the eyes. Then Robert did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Marcus stared at it for a moment, hardly believing what he was seeing. He reached out and shook it firmly. Robert's grip was strong, but there was no anger in it anymore. Just acknowledgement. Two men who had both made mistakes, both been pushed to their limits in different ways. Officer Chen watched with satisfaction. This was why she loved her job. These moments when people chose understanding over punishment. She knew that the mall management might not agree with her handling of the situation, but she was willing to face those consequences. Some things were more important than following the rulebook exactly. Lauren buckled Emma into her car seat in the parking lot, while Marcus retrieved what was left of the stroller. The frame was bent, one wheel completely broken off. He looked at it and felt a fresh wave of shame. This stroller had been a gift from his late wife, Emma's mother. She had died in a car accident when Emma was just 6 months old. Marcus had been raising Emma alone ever since. The stroller was one of the few tangible things he had left from his wife. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't just thrown a stroller. He had thrown away a piece of his wife's memory in a moment of rage. He sank down onto the curb, the damaged stroller in his hands, and let himself cry properly for the first time since the incident. All the grief he had been holding back, all the pain of loss and fear for his daughter, poured out of him. Lauren found him there a few minutes later. She sat down beside him on the curb, not saying anything, just being present. She remembered the stroller, remembered helping her sister-in-law pick it out at a baby store, laughing about all the unnecessary features it had. When Marcus finally told her what he had realized about the stroller, Lauren wrapped her arm around his shoulders. She reminded him that objects were just objects. His wife's memory lived in Emma, in the way she smiled, in her laugh, in her kindness. A broken stroller couldn't take that away. Marcus knew she was right, but it still hurt. Another loss in a long line of losses. But this time, he wasn't alone in his grief. Lauren was there, and that made all the difference. They made it to the doctor's office with 5 minutes to spare. The receptionist, who had been expecting them after Officer Chen's call, greeted them warmly. She had prepared the paperwork in advance and rushed them through check-in. Emma was called back almost immediately, and both Marcus and Lauren went with her into the examination. ROOM Dr. Sarah Martinez was a pediatric neurologist with 20 years of experience. She had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a gentle manner that immediately put Emma at ease. She performed a thorough examination while asking Emma questions about her favorite things. Emma talked about her stuffed rabbit, about her daddy, about her aunt she hadn't seen in a long time but was happy to see today. Dr. Martinez then asked Marcus detailed questions about Emma's symptoms. When had the headache started? How often did they occur? What seemed to trigger them? Marcus answered as best he could, his voice still shaky from the emotional morning. Lauren added observations too, details that Marcus had mentioned in passing during their rare phone conversations over the past months. After the examination, Dr. Martinez sat down with them. She explained that she wanted to run several tests, including an MRI, to rule out serious conditions. However, based on her examination and the symptom description, she suspected Emma might be suffering from severe stress-related headaches. She asked about any major changes or traumas in Emma's life. Marcus felt his heart sink. He explained about losing his wife, about being a single parent, about the struggles of the past 2 years. As he spoke, he realized something painful. He had been so focused on being strong for Emma, on not letting her see him grieve, that he hadn't considered how his stress might be affecting her. Children were perceptive. Emma had probably been picking up on his anxiety, his sadness, his struggle. Dr. Martinez nodded sympathetically. She said that children often internalize their parents' emotions, especially when there had been a traumatic loss. Emma's headaches might be her body's way of expressing the grief and stress she didn't have words for. The doctor recommended not just medical tests, but also counseling for both Emma and Marcus. She gave them referrals to child psychologists who specialized in grief and trauma. Marcus felt overwhelmed by this new information. He had been so worried about a brain tumor or some other physical ailment that he hadn't considered the emotional component. The guilt washed over him again. How had he missed this? How had he let his daughter suffer because he was too proud to admit they both needed help? Lauren squeezed his hand. She reminded him that he was doing the best he could. Single parenting was hard enough without the added trauma of loss. The important thing was that they were here now, getting help. Emma would be okay. They would all be okay. Marcus wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. They scheduled the MRI for the following week and made appointments with the recommended therapists. As they left the office, Marcus felt a strange mixture of relief and fear. Relief that they were finally taking action, that they had answers and a plan. Fear of what they might discover. Both in the medical tests and in the therapy sessions, Emma fell asleep in her car seat on the drive to Lauren's house. She had insisted they come over, said that Marcus and Emma would stay for dinner, that it was not negotiable. Marcus was too tired to argue. He realized he hadn't had a home-cooked meal in months. He and Emma had been surviving on takeout and whatever he could quickly throw together between work and appointments. At Lauren's house, her husband Michael greeted them warmly. He had heard about the incident at the mall from Lauren's quick phone call, but he didn't judge or lecture. He just helped carry Emma inside and suggested Marcus take a shower and rest while Emma napped. Marcus accepted gratefully, feeling the weight of the day pressing down on him. The hot water from the shower washed away more than just the sweat and tension of the day. Marcus stood under the stream, letting himself feel everything he had been pushing down for months. The fear for Emma, the loneliness of being a single parent, the crushing responsibility of making every decision alone, the grief for his wife that he had never properly processed because he had to be strong for Emma. When he finally emerged, wearing borrowed clothes from Michael, he found Lauren in the kitchen preparing dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the house. Emma was awake now, sitting at the kitchen table with Michael, helping him sort through a box of old photographs. Marcus heard his daughter's laugh, a sound he hadn't heard enough of lately, and felt his throat tighten with emotion. Lauren turned from the stove and saw the expression on her brother's face. She set down the wooden spoon and walked over to him. Without words, she pulled him into a hug. Marcus held on to his sister, this person he had pushed away because accepting help felt like admitting defeat. How foolish he had been. How much time they had wasted. Over dinner, they talked. Really talked like they hadn't in years. Michael shared stories about his own struggles with anxiety when their children were young. Lauren admitted that she had wanted to reach out so many times but didn't know how, afraid Marcus would reject her help. Marcus realized that his pride had cost him more than he had known. He had isolated himself and Emma when they needed family the most. Emma ate her vegetables without complaint, something she rarely did at home. She chattered happily about the photos she had been looking at, asking questions about family members she didn't remember. Marcus watched her animated face and saw his wife in her expressions, in the way she tilted her head when she was curious. The resemblance was both painful and beautiful. After dinner, Lauren brought up the practical matters. Marcus needed to deal with the mall incident. He had to pay for the damages, write the apology letters, and arrange for the counseling that Officer Chen had required. Lauren offered to help with all of it. She also suggested that Emma spend a few days with them while Marcus got things sorted out. She could take Emma to school, 2 playdates, give Marcus some breathing room. Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. He didn't want to be separated from Emma, didn't want to burden his sister. But then he looked at Emma, who was building a tower with blocks Michael had brought out. She looked relaxed and happy in a way she hadn't been at home in a long time. Maybe some time apart would be good for both of them. Maybe he needed to learn that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. He agreed to Lauren's plan. They would pick up clothes and Emma's things from the apartment tomorrow. Emma would stay with Lauren and Michael for the rest of the week. Marcus would use that time to attend the first counseling session, meet with mall management, and start putting the pieces of his life back together. That night, Marcus tucked Emma into the guest bed at Lauren's house. She looked so small in the big bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She asked him if he was still sad. The question caught Marcus off guard. He had thought he was hiding his emotions so well, but children always knew. He sat on the edge of the bed and told her the truth. Yes, he was sad sometimes. He missed Mommy very much. But he was also happy because he had Emma, the best daughter in the whole world, and he promised to try to be better, to not be so stressed all the time. Emma nodded seriously, then asked if that's why her head hurt, because she was sad too. Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. His brave, perceptive little girl. He told her that maybe that was part of it. But the doctors were going to help them figure it out. He promised they would talk more about Mommy, look at pictures together, remember the happy times. Emma smiled and said she would like that. Then she asked one more question that broke his heart. Was Daddy going to go away like Mommy did? Marcus pulled her into his arms and held her tight. He promised he wasn't going anywhere. He would always be there for her, no matter what. He explained that what happened today at the mall was a mistake, that Daddy got too angry and did something wrong, but he was going to fix it. Emma hugged him back fiercely, and they stayed like that until she fell asleep. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus met with mall management to discuss restitution. The security equipment damage totaled $800. It was money he didn't really have, but Lauren loaned it to him without hesitation. He wrote detailed apology letters to Robert, Officer Chen, and the mall management. They're taking full responsibility for his actions. He also attended his first counseling session. The therapist, Dr. James Patterson, specialized in grief and anger management. The session was harder than Marcus expected. Dr. Patterson asked him to talk about his wife, about the day she died, about how he had coped since then. Marcus found himself breaking down, sobbing in a way he never had. Not even at the funeral. Dr. Patterson didn't try to stop the tears or offer empty platitudes. He let Marcus grieve, let him express the rage and helplessness he had been bottling up. The incident at the mall, Dr. Patterson explained, was a symptom of unprocessed trauma. Marcus had been running on empty for so long that the smallest trigger had caused a complete breakdown. Through the tears, Marcus began to see a path forward. Dr. Patterson talked about healthy coping mechanisms, about the importance of self-care, about rebuilding a support system. He gave Marcus homework assignments, things to think about and write down before their next session. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus felt like maybe, just maybe, he could get through this. Emma's therapy sessions were going well too. Her therapist, Dr. Amy Chen, used play therapy to help Emma express her feelings. Marcus sat in on the first session and watched his daughter play with dolls, acting out scenarios that revealed her confusion and grief over losing her mother. It was painful to watch, but also necessary. Emma needed this outlet. Robert, the security guard, surprised everyone by showing up at one of Marcus's counseling sessions. Dr. Patterson had suggested that a face-to-face meeting might help both men find closure. Robert admitted that the incident had made him reflect on his own life, his own regrets. He talked about his estranged children, about how work had consumed him and left him lonely. The two men found common ground in their brokenness. They talked about the pressure of being providers, feeling like showing emotion was weakness, of building walls around themselves. By the end of the conversation, something had shifted between them. They weren't friends exactly. They had reached understanding and forgiveness. Marcus returned to work at his job as an accountant, but with new boundaries in place. He spoke with his boss about his situation, something he should have done months ago. His boss was understanding and arranged for flexible hours and the option to work from home when needed. Marcus realized that people were more compassionate than he had given them credit for. He just had to let them in. Lauren and Michael became regular fixtures in Marcus and Emma's life again. They had dinner together twice a week. Lauren helped with school pickups when Marcus had appointments. Michael took Emma to the park, giving Marcus time to attend therapy or just rest. The support network that Marcus had desperately needed was finally in place. The day of Emma's MRI arrived with a mixture of hope and fear. Marcus had spent the previous night barely sleeping, imagining worst-case scenarios. But this time, he didn't face it alone. Lauren met them at the hospital early in the morning, bringing Emma's favorite breakfast and a new coloring book to keep her distracted. Emma was nervous about the big machine. She had seen pictures during her preparation appointment, but the reality was more intimidating. The MRI technician, a gentle woman named Rosa, explained everything in terms Emma could understand. She said the machine was like a camera that would take pictures of Emma's brain to help the doctors make her headaches go away. Marcus held Emma's hand until the last possible moment. Then he stood behind the glass with Lauren, watching his tiny daughter disappear into the massive machine. The noise started, loud thuds and whirs that sounded alarming, even though Rosa had warned them. Marcus gripped Lauren's hand tightly, praying silently for good news. The scan took 45 minutes that felt like hours. When it was finally over, Emma emerged, looking tired but proud of herself for being brave. Marcus scooped her up and covered her face with kisses. Rosa said the results would be sent to Dr. Martinez within 24 hours. The waiting would be the hardest part. They spent the rest of the day trying to keep busy. Lauren suggested a trip to the Children's Museum, something low-key that would keep Emma entertained without overwhelming her. Marcus agreed, grateful for his sister's constant support. At the museum, Emma ran from exhibit to exhibit, her headache seemingly forgotten for a while. Marcus followed behind, taking photos on his phone, capturing moments he had been too stressed to notice before. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Marcus sat on his apartment balcony with a cup of tea. He thought about how much had changed in just 2 weeks. The man who had thrown that stroller felt like a different person. The anger that had consumed him that day had been transformed into something else. Not gone, exactly, but manageable. He understood it now, understood where it came from and how to handle it. Dr. Patterson had helped him see that anger was often just fear wearing a mask. Marcus had been afraid of losing Emma like he lost his wife, afraid of failing as a parent, afraid of asking for help and appearing weak. That fear had built up until it exploded in the worst possible way. Now he was learning to recognize the warning signs, to reach out before things got that bad. The next afternoon, Dr. Martinez called with the MRI results. Marcus's heart pounded as he answered the phone, Lauren sitting beside him for support. The doctor's voice was calm and reassuring. The MRI showed no tumors, no structural abnormalities, no signs of serious disease. Emma's brain was healthy. Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. Lauren grabbed his hand and squeezed hard. Dr. Martinez explained that this confirmed her initial diagnosis. Emma's headaches were likely stress-related, possibly tension headaches brought on by grief and anxiety. The treatment plan would focus on therapy, stress reduction techniques, and possibly some mild medication for when the headaches were severe. But the prognosis was excellent. With proper support and coping strategies, Emma would be fine. After hanging up, Marcus cried, but these were tears of joy and relief. The weight he had been carrying for months lifted from his shoulders. His daughter was going to be okay. They were going to be okay. Lauren cried with him, and they held each other like they had when they were children. Before life got complicated, Marcus called Emma's school that evening and spoke with her teacher, Mrs. Robinson. He explained everything that had been happening, something he should have done long ago. Mrs. Robinson was incredibly understanding. She said she had noticed Emma seemed withdrawn lately and was glad to know why. She offered to work with Emma's therapist to create a supportive environment at school. The teacher also mentioned something that surprised Marcus. Several other children in the class had lost parents or were going through difficult family situations. Mrs. Robinson suggested a peer support group for the kids, a safe space where they could talk about their feelings with others who understood. Marcus thought it was a wonderful idea and immediately agreed to let Emma participate. As weeks turned into months, the changes in their lives became more evident. Emma's headaches decreased in frequency and severity. She was smiling more, sleeping better, making friends at school. Her therapy sessions revealed that she had been carrying guilt, feeling somehow responsible for her mother's death because she had asked to go to the store that day. Working through that guilt with Dr. Chen made a tremendous difference. Marcus's own therapy was transformative in ways he hadn't expected. Dr. Patterson helped him work through not just the recent incident, but years of accumulated pain. They talked about his childhood, about his relationship with his wife, about his fears and insecurities. Marcus learned that his tendency to isolate himself had roots in his past, in a father who had taught him that real men didn't ask for help. Breaking those old patterns wasn't easy. There were setbacks. Days when Marcus felt overwhelmed and wanted to retreat into himself. But now, he had tools to combat those impulses. He had phone numbers to call. He had his sister who checked in regularly. He had a therapist who helped him process emotions before they became explosive. The mall incident became a turning point. Rather than a shameful secret, Marcus completed all the requirements Officer Chen had set forth. He paid for the damages, attended the required anger management sessions, and wrote heartfelt apology letters. But more than that, he used the experience as motivation to become a better version of himself. Officer Chen reached out to Marcus 3 months after the incident. She wanted to know how he was doing, if the counseling was helping, if Emma's health had improved. Marcus was touched that she remembered and cared enough to follow up. He invited her to coffee to properly thank her for giving him a second chance when she could have easily had him arrested. Over coffee? Yes. Officer Chen shared her own story. Her brother had struggled with anger issues and mental health problems for years. The system had failed him, treating him as a criminal rather than someone who needed help. By the time anyone offered him real support, it was too late. He had taken his own life 5 years ago. That loss had shaped Officer Chen's approach to her work. She believed in second chances, in seeing the person behind the behavior. When she looked at Marcus that day in the mall, she didn't see a violent criminal. She saw a desperate father who needed help, not handcuffs. She had taken a risk going against protocol, and she was glad it had paid off. Marcus thanked her with tears in his eyes. He told her that she had saved his life, maybe even Emma's life. Without her intervention, without her compassion, things could have gone so differently. He might have been arrested, lost his job, maybe even lost custody of Emma. Instead, he had gotten the help he needed and was building a better life for both of them. Robert also stayed in touch, surprisingly. He and Marcus met for lunch occasionally. Their unlikely friendship was built on mutual understanding and the shared experience of learning to be more human. Robert had started reaching out to his estranged adult children. Inspired by Marcus's dedication to Emma, the conversations were awkward at first. But slowly, relationships were being rebuilt. Marcus started a journal, something Dr. Patterson had suggested. He wrote about his feelings, his struggles, his victories. He wrote letters to his late wife, telling her about Emma's progress, about his own journey. It was therapeutic. Having a place to put all the thoughts that used to swirl in his head with no outlet. One entry particularly stood out. Marcus wrote about forgiveness. He had to forgive himself for that day at the mall, for all the ways he felt he had failed Emma and his wife. He had to forgive his father for teaching him that vulnerability was weakness. He had to forgive the universe for taking his wife too soon. Forgiveness, he was learning, wasn't about forgetting or excusing. It was about releasing the weight so he could move forward. Emma made a friend at school named Sophie, whose mother had died the previous year. The two girls bonded over their shared loss and became inseparable. Sophie's father, Tom, reached out to Marcus, and they formed their own friendship. They understood each other in ways that people who hadn't experienced such loss couldn't. Helped each other navigate the challenges of single parenting while grieving. Tom suggested they start a support group for single parents who had lost partners. Marcus loved the idea. They began meeting monthly at a community center, sharing resources, offering advice, and simply being there for each other. The group grew quickly, proof that many people were struggling in silence, just as Marcus had been. At one of the group meetings, Marcus shared his story about the mall incident. He didn't hide his shame or try to justify his actions. He owned what he had done and talked about the journey since then. His honesty resonated with others who had their own moments of breaking. Their own times when grief and stress had overwhelmed them. Several people approached him afterward, thanking him for his vulnerability. One man confessed he had punched a wall and broken his hand. A woman admitted she had screamed at her children so badly that her neighbors called child services. These were good people pushed past their limits, people who needed help but were too proud or too scared to ask for it. Marcus realized that his worst moment had become his greatest teaching tool. By sharing his story, he was helping others avoid the same mistakes. He was showing them that it was okay to not be okay, that asking for help was a sign of strength, not weakness. His pain had purpose now. Lauren organized a memorial service for Marcus's wife on the 2nd anniversary of her death. It was something they hadn't done properly before, Marcus too numb to arrange it at the time. Friends and family gathered at a park she had loved, sharing memories and celebrating her life. Emma participated, releasing a balloon with a drawing she had made for her mommy. Marcus spoke about his wife, really spoke about her for the first time since she died. He talked about her laugh, her kindness, her dreams for Emma. He admitted his struggles and thanked everyone who had supported them through the dark times. It was emotional and cathartic. A proper goodbye that he hadn't allowed himself before. After the service, Emma seemed lighter somehow. She had been able to honor her mother openly, to see that it was okay to talk about her, to miss her. Marcus realized they had both been tiptoeing around the grief, afraid to fully acknowledge it. Now it was out in the open, and that made it easier to bear. As the 6-month mark approached since the mall incident, Marcus reflected on the journey. He was not the same man who had thrown that stroller in anger. He had been broken down and rebuilt, and the new version was stronger because he had learned to embrace his vulnerabilities. He had learned that true strength came from connection, from admitting when you needed help, from being honest about your struggles. 6 months after the incident, Marcus stood in the parking lot of Riverside Mall, staring at the entrance where everything had changed. He had avoided coming back, the shame too fresh, the memories too painful. But today was different. Today, he was ready to face this place again, to close that chapter of his life properly. Emma held his hand as they walked through the entrance. She didn't remember much about that day, which was a blessing. The trauma hadn't imprinted on her the way Marcus had feared it might. They were here today for a specific purpose, one that Marcus had been planning for weeks. Officer Chen met them at the security checkpoint. She had arranged for Marcus to speak with the mall management about starting a program for stressed parents. Marcus had developed an idea during his therapy sessions, a way to turn his mistake into something helpful. He wanted to create designated quiet spaces in the mall where parents could take a moment to decompress when they felt overwhelmed. The mall manager, Mrs. Patricia Reynolds, was initially skeptical. But when Marcus shared his story, when he explained how a few minutes of calm might have prevented the entire incident, she began to see the value. Parents spent significant money at the mall. Keeping them happy and reducing incidents was good for business. She agreed to a trial program. Marcus worked with a designer to create the first calm room. It was a small space near the family restrooms, equipped with comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and stress relief resources. There were fidget toys, noise-canceling headphones, and information about local mental health services. A sign outside explained that the room was available for anyone who needed a moment of peace. The response was overwhelming. Parents used the room constantly, leaving grateful notes in a comment book. Mothers nursing babies appreciated the quiet space. Fathers dealing with tantrums found it helpful to step away and breathe. Elderly shoppers used it to rest. The mall management was so pleased that they approved funding for 2 more calm rooms in different areas of the building. Local news picked up the story. A reporter interviewed Marcus about the program's origins. He was nervous about sharing his story publicly, worried about judgment. But Dr. Patterson encouraged him, reminding him that his vulnerability could help countless others. Marcus agreed to the interview, and Lauren stood beside him for support. The segment aired on a Tuesday evening. Marcus watched it with Emma curled up beside him, Lauren and Michael on the other couch. Seeing himself on screen was surreal. He looked different than he remembered from that awful day, calmer, more at peace. When the segment ended with information about the calm rooms and mental health resources, Marcus's phone immediately started, buzzing with messages. Friends he hadn't heard from in years reached out with words of support. Acquaintances shared their own struggles with anger and grief. Parents thanked him for advocating for mental health awareness. Even a few people who had been at the mall that day contacted him, saying they understood now what he had been going through and respected his courage in speaking out. But there was one message that meant more than all the others. It was from Robert's son, Daniel. He said watching the interview had inspired him to reach out to his father after 5 years of silence. They had met for dinner, and while things were still awkward, it was a start. Daniel thanked Marcus for giving his father the wake-up call that led to this reconciliation. Marcus showed the message to Robert the next time they met for lunch. The older man's eyes filled with tears as he read it. He admitted he had watched the interview multiple times, still amazed at how one terrible day had led to so many positive changes. Not just for Marcus and Emma, but for his own family too. Emma's therapy continued to show remarkable progress. Dr. Chen reported that Emma was processing her grief in healthy ways, talking openly about her mother and her feelings. The headaches were rare now, usually only appearing during particularly stressful times like tests or changes in routine. Marcus had learned to recognize the warning signs and help Emma use coping strategies before the pain became severe. The support group for single parents that Marcus and Tom had started was now meeting twice monthly and had over 30 regular members. They'd created a resource network, sharing babysitters, recommending therapists, helping each other with everything from fixing broken appliances to navigating the dating world as a single parent. Marcus had found his tribe, people who understood his journey. One member of the group, a woman named Jennifer, had recently lost her husband to cancer. They had 3 young children and was drowning in grief and responsibility. Marcus recognized his own desperation in her eyes during her first meeting. He made it a point to check in with her regularly, to share what he had learned, to be the support he wished he had found sooner. Jennifer took his advice to heart. She started therapy, reached out to family she had been too proud to ask for help, and slowly began to find her footing. Watching her transformation reminded Marcus of how far he had come. He had gone from being someone who needed saving to someone who could help save others. Marcus's relationship with his own family continued to deepen. Lauren's children, his nephew and niece, had become close with Emma. The cousins had sleepovers and playdates, giving Emma the sibling experience she otherwise wouldn't have. Marcus and Michael bonded over sports and weekend projects. Family dinners that had started as occasional events became weekly traditions. His father reached out unexpectedly one afternoon. They hadn't spoken in over a year, their relationship strained by old hurts and different worldviews. His father had seen the news segment and wanted to talk. The conversation was difficult, full of long pauses and carefully chosen words. But it was a beginning. Marcus's father admitted he had been wrong to teach his son that emotions were weakness. He had been raised that way himself and didn't know any different. Seeing what it had cost Marcus, seeing how close his son had come to losing everything, had opened his eyes. He asked if they could try to build a better relationship, not just for themselves, but so Emma could know her grandfather. Marcus agreed with clear boundaries. Therapy had taught him that forgiveness didn't mean allowing toxic patterns to continue. They would take things slowly, build trust gradually. His father agreed to the terms, and even said he would consider going to therapy himself to work through his own issues. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was honest and hopeful. Emma's 5th birthday arrived with celebration and joy. They held a party at Lauren's house, with both families present. Emma blew out her candles and made a wish. When Marcus asked what she wished for, she said she wished for everyone to always be this happy. The simple wisdom of a child who had learned that happiness was precious and worth celebrating. Looking around the room at all the people who loved Emma, at the family that had rallied around them, Marcus felt gratitude wash over him. Yes, he had made a terrible mistake that day at the mall. Yes, he had hit rock bottom in spectacular fashion. But that moment of crisis had forced him to face truths he had been avoiding. It had torn down the walls he had built and let light back into his life. Marcus returned to Riverside Mall regularly now. He's no longer avoiding the place. He checked on the comm rooms, made sure they were well stocked and functioning. He chatted with Robert during his visits, their friendship an unexpected gift from tragedy. He even brought Emma sometimes, showing her that we don't have to be defined by our worst moments. One afternoon, Marcus witnessed a father losing his patience with his screaming toddler in the mall. The man's face was red, his voice raised, and Marcus could see he was approaching that breaking point. Without judgment, Marcus approached and gently mentioned the comm room nearby. He shared that he had been there too, overwhelmed and desperate. The father looked at him with grateful tears and hurried toward the comm room. Later, Marcus saw the same father emerge, looking composed, his child calm in his arms. The man found Marcus and thanked him, saying those few minutes of breathing and quiet had saved him from doing something he would regret. Marcus gave him information about the support group and his therapist's contact. He watched the man walk away with hope that he would seek help before hitting the same bottom Marcus had. These moments of connection, of turning his pain into purpose, gave Marcus's life new meaning. He had started writing a blog about his experiences, offering advice and encouragement to other struggling parents. The response was tremendous, with thousands of people following his journey and sharing their own stories. He had become an accidental advocate for mental health and parental support. Emma started kindergarten that fall, a milestone that filled Marcus with both pride and bittersweetness. His wife should have been there to see it, to hold his hand as they watched their daughter walk into that classroom. But he wasn't alone. Lauren was there, taking pictures and wiping away tears. The support group friends were there, celebrating with him at coffee afterward. His father was there, trying in his awkward way to be present. Marcus had learned that grief didn't disappear. It became part of you, woven into your story. But it didn't have to define you or destroy you. With the right support, with honesty and vulnerability, you could carry grief and still find joy. You could honor the past while building a future. Dr. Patterson reduced Marcus's sessions to once monthly, confident that Marcus had the tools he needed to navigate life's challenges. Before leaving his final weekly session, Marcus thanked his therapist for saving his life. Dr. Patterson smiled and said Marcus had saved his own life. The therapist had just provided the map. Marcus had done the hard work of actually making the journey. On the 1-year anniversary of the mall incident, Marcus wrote a letter to his younger self, the man who had thrown that stroller in desperate anger. He told him that the pain he was feeling was valid, that his fear was understandable, that his breaking point was human. But he also told him about the other side of that darkness, about the light that was waiting, once he was brave enough to ask for help. Marcus kept that letter in his journal, a reminder of how far he had come and how much he had grown. He also kept the broken wheel from the stroller, the one piece he had saved. It sat on his desk as a symbol of mistakes made and lessons learned, a symbol of breaking and rebuilding, a symbol that sometimes our lowest moments can become the foundation for our greatest transformations. Emma thrived in ways that filled Marcus with daily wonder. She talked about her mother openly now, sharing memories and asking questions. She had friends and hobbies and dreams for the future. Her headaches were rare, manageable when they occurred. She was seeing her child therapist monthly now, just for check-ins, and doing remarkably well. Marcus stood at his window one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma was at Lauren's house for a sleepover with her cousins. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't the lonely silence of before. It was peaceful silence, the kind that comes from knowing you're not alone, even when you're by yourself. He thought about that day at the mall, about the crowd's shocked faces, about Officer Chun's compassion, about Robert's eventual understanding. He thought about how one moment of losing control had paradoxically helped him gain control of his life. The journey from that lowest point to here had been painful and difficult, but absolutely necessary. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from Emma. It was a photo Lauren had taken of the 3 cousins making silly faces, all of them in pajamas and surrounded by pillows. Emma had added hearts and a message saying she loved her daddy. Marcus smiled, saved the photo, and sent back his own message of love. Tomorrow, he had a speaking engagement at a local community center, sharing his story with other struggling parents. Next week, the mall was opening a fourth calm room and wanted him to cut the ribbon. His blog post about forgiveness had been shared thousands of times. His support group was expanding to include a grief counseling component. Life was full and meaningful in ways he never could have imagined during those dark months of isolation. As Marcus prepared for bed that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle or pain, the presence of hope and purpose. He had learned that rock bottom could be a foundation if you chose to build rather than sink. He had learned that community was stronger than pride. He had learned that the bravest thing a person could do was admit they needed help. The story that had started with anger and violence had transformed into one of healing and hope. Marcus knew there would be hard days ahead. Grief would resurface. Challenges would arise. But he also knew he had the tools to face them now. He had his family, his support system, his therapist, his purpose. He had learned to ask for help before breaking, to be vulnerable before becoming violent, to reach out before falling apart. And most importantly, he had Emma, his brave, beautiful daughter who had taught him that love was worth fighting for, that healing was possible. Not even from the darkest moments, light could emerge. She was his reason for becoming better, for staying better, for building a life worth living. As Marcus drifted off to sleep, he whispered a thank you to his late wife for the gift of their daughter, and a promise that he would continue to be the father Emma deserved. Not perfect, but present. Not fearless, but faithful. Not alone, but supported and supporting others. The story of the dad who threw the stroller in anger had become the story of the dad who learned to build bridges instead of walls, who learned that strength came through vulnerability, and who discovered that sometimes our biggest mistakes can become our most powerful testimonies. Marcus Williams had been broken, but in the rebuilding he had become whole in ways he never was before.